Back here on CBS Sports HQ, and just like that, our Stanley Cup Final is set as the Edmonton Oilers are the Western Conference champs for the second straight year. We're set for another rematch against the reigning Stanley Cup champs, the Florida Panthers, after Edmonton defeated the Dallas Stars 6-3 in Game 5 of the Western Conference Finals. I'm sorry, Haley. We are all actually very sorry.
Are we?
Yeah.
Is anyone in this building
I was kind of rooting for you. I was kind of rooting for you.
Thank you, Jordan.
The Stanley Cup Final will take us down memory lane to last June when the series went the distance. The full 7 games with Florida taking the first 3 before Edmonton mounted a comeback. But Game 1 is set for Wednesday night in Edmonton. For much more on the Stanley Cup Final between Edmonton and Florida, let's go ahead and welcome in our own Pierre McGuire. Pierre, great to see you. Before we kind of look ahead, though, to Game 1 on Wednesday, we have to get your thoughts on how Game 5 played out that ended in an Oilers win.
Jordan, you got to give a lot of credit to the Edmonton Oilers. They were fast, they were skillful, they were deep. They got goaltending from Stuart Skinner that a lot of people didn't think they would get. You know, they held the Dallas Stars to less than 20 shots on goal, which is not an easy thing to do when you're playing in a really important playoff game, especially on the road like Edmonton was. Full marks to Connor McDavid. He's now legitimately the best player in the National Hockey League. Doesn't mean he's going to win the Stanley Cup this year, but he is without a doubt the best player in the National Hockey League. There were so many things going right for the Edmonton Oilers. Jordan, I got to tell you, whether it was their size, whether it was their depth, whether it was their speed, whether it was their penalty killing, which was super elite, there were so many positive things for Edmonton on this playoff run so far, especially when you consider they lost their first 2 games when the playoffs started to the LA Kings. Since then, they're 12-2. It's just an amazing record.
I'm glad that you brought up McDavid. It's hard to root against that guy. We'll get to him shortly, but now we get a rematch of last year's Stanley Cup Final, but this year it actually starts in Edmonton. How much of an edge will that actually be for the Oilers to have home ice to start this rematch?
It's a great point, Jordan. I think the first 10 minutes of Game 1 will matter for Edmonton, and Florida, because of their experience, won't wilt it to their 3rd straight trip to the Stanley Cup Final in 3 years. It's an amazing accomplishment, especially in the salary cap era. But I do think the first 10 minutes of Game 1 will matter, and then after that, it'll all just kind of calm down, and Florida will get entrenched. They've played in some pretty hostile environments this playoff season. When you talk about the Florida Panthers, they had to win a Game 7 on the road in Toronto. Not an easy thing to do. They obviously had a real tough series with Carolina, even though most people say, well, they ran over Carolina. To win in Carolina 3 times is not an easy thing to do. Florida's battle-tested, but I do think with it starting in Edmonton, they got to manage the first 10 minutes of Game 1, and if they don't, it'll give Edmonton a little bit of an advantage, Jordan.
We're taking a look at the full schedule of the Stanley Cup Final. As we mentioned, Game 1 on Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, starting in Edmonton. Then the series will shift back to sunrise on Monday, June 9th, where the Panthers actually join some elite company, Pierre, of teams with the most Stanley Cup Final appearances. I want you to take a look at this because this marks their 3rd final appearance since 1980. Now, that also ties the Lightning and the Oilers, who also have 3 apiece. You see the New York Islanders there with 5. What does this dominance say about Bill Zito and what he has been able to build in Sunrise?
A lot, and I'm glad you brought up Mr. Zito's name. Bill's done a fantastic job. I'll date myself. I was coaching at St. Lawrence University, and he was an every other day kind of player at Yale University. So he identified the importance for getting talent, for getting character, for getting grit, for getting guys that are coachable. And he's done a fantastic job with his staff down in Florida. You know, Sasha Barkov, who makes that great assist over to Carter Verhaeghe, he was drafted by the last regime led by Dale Talon. But you look at all the components that they put together, whether it's Sam Bennett, whether it's Matthew Tkachuk, whether it's Seth Jones, the list goes on and on. They've created a murderer's row of players down in South Florida, and a lot of the credit has to go to Billy Zito and his scouting staff.
Zeroing in on what's going on the ice and looking at this matchup specifically in net here, Stuart Skinner and Sergei Bobrovsky, who do you give the edge to?
Jordan, I got to give the edge to Sergei Bobrovsky. He's a Stanley Cup champion. He's been to the final one other time before that. He really understands the position. This is not a knock on Stuart Skinner, but after the first round, in the first 2 games, he got pulled. Calvin Pickard came in for the Edmonton Oilers, and then Pickard looked like he was going to run with the ball. He gets injured. Stuart Skinner comes back in. I have so much respect for the mental resilience and the toughness of Stuart Skinner and the athleticism of Stuart Skinner, but I don't think he's as consistent as Sergei Bobrovsky. So I'm going to give the edge in goal to Sergei Bobrovsky and the Florida Panthers. But you know what? Stuart Skinner's been PPWing a lot of people, proving people wrong a lot. He could do the same thing to me, but I do think Bobrovsky gets the edge going into the final.
Yeah, can't count him out, but experience seems to win every time. We'll wait and see. Zeroing in on one guy in particular who you mentioned earlier, who's really looking for more than a Conn Smythe this year, and that is Connor McDavid. As we know, he won the award last year despite the Oilers losing the Stanley Cup final. He has been one of the best players, if not the best player on the planet this year, winning multiple awards. However, until he has a cup, people will still debate just how great he is. At this point, if you're not a Panthers fan, Pierre, should everyone who loves the game of hockey be rooting for Connor McDavid and the Oilers to take this one home?
I think you should be rooting for him because of his greatness. Jordan, he's just phenomenal. You go back to all the different things he's accomplished over the course of his career, whether it was as a midget player, a junior player, playing internationally for Canada at the World Junior, playing in the Four Nations event this year where he scores the overtime winner for Canada over the U.S., the fact he won a Conn Smythe trophy last year even though his team lost. He's one of the only players I've ever seen when he gets the puck, he doesn't just accelerate ×1. He usually accelerates ×2. For most players, they have to slow down when they get the puck. Connor McDavid speeds up, and he can make plays at that high rate of speed. I've never seen that in the history of my career. The first NHL game I ever saw, I'll date myself, with 1965 at Old Madison Square Garden. You know, and I've been in the NHL for 35 years, so I've seen some really good players come and go. I've never seen a guy do what he does at his rate of speed. He's very special, and it's hard to root against him. With this all, let's get an early pick here, Pierre. Who do you have raising that cup when it's all said and done between Edmonton and Florida? I still think until Edmonton proves that they can beat Florida, that the Florida Panthers are the favorite, and I think the Florida Panthers will win the Stanley Cup. I said it before the last round. I think Sergei Bobrovsky will win the Conn Smythe Trophy. That's not a knock on the greatness of the Edmonton Oilers. They're a great team. But I think there's too much depth, there's too much will, there's too much in Florida in terms of size, and their depth on defense. When you look at the entire defense core, the 6 guys, if there's one team that matches up well to shut down Edmonton's star power, it's the Florida Panthers because of their size, their skating, and their physicality on defense. All right. Sounds good to me. We look forward to the start of this series as the Stanley Cup Final is set. Pierre McGuire, always great to see you, my friend, here on CBS Sports HQ. The rematch is here as Game 1 is slated for this upcoming Wednesday, June 4th. From Edmonton before the series shifts back to Sunrise, Florida, Monday, June 9th. Puck drop for Game 1 slated for 8 p.m. Eastern between the Florida Panthers and Edmonton Oilers.
Back here on HQ Spotlight, and so we meet again. We get a Stanley Cup Final rematch with the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers. The Cats beat Edmonton in 7 games last season for their first cup in franchise history. It was a bit of a doozy if you were a Florida Panthers fan after being up 3-0. Then the Oilers kind of crawled back, forced to Game 7. Ultimately, the Cats won it. And remember, Connor McDavid, he won the Conn Smythe, just the 6th player ever to win it as a member of the losing team. The series gets underway on Wednesday, Game 1 from Edmonton. If we're looking at Vegas and those odds, they're kind of saying it's going to be close. It's going to be a toss-up. So we're going to get into the weeds and really break it down with our hockey analyst, Pierre McGuire. Pierre, always a pleasure talking some puck with you here on HQ. We're getting into a preview, and we're going to talk about how each team can win certain things. So Connor McDavid and the Oilers, they get another crack at this thing. McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard, Nugent-Hopkins, all these guys have been phenomenal. No Hyman, he is out. He's getting surgery, dealing with an injury there. They do get Ekholm back for Game 5. We saw that. What can this team build upon from the experience and what we saw last season to maybe have a different outcome this season in this series?
Well, first of all, they've got to get Stuart Skinner to play the way he's played the last little while. You don't want to have the Stuart Skinner that was playing in the first round against the Los Angeles Kings. Edmonton goes down 0-2. He gets replaced. And then the next time he comes back into the net against the Vegas Golden Knights, he loses a game with less than 0.5 of a second to go, but then he bounces back and gets 2 shutouts, and that's when Stuart Skinner really started to take off. So for Edmonton to win, Stuart Skinner's going to have to be exceptional. And I think the biggest thing, you just touched on it, Jacqueline, the star power of the Edmonton Oilers. If those top players really can't be top players, that becomes a problem. And I have no disrespect meant to LA. A lot of good friends on the coaching staff there. No disrespect meant to Vegas. Lots of good friends on the coaching staff there. No disrespect meant to Dallas. Lots of good friends on the coaching staff there. None of them present a physical problem the way the Florida Panthers will for the star players in Edmonton. None of them.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback off of the Stu Skinner thing and just talk about the goaltending in general with these two teams. When we're looking at Bobrovsky and we're looking at Stu Skinner, ultimately, who do you think has the edge here in terms of goaltending based off of the last couple of games that we've seen? Because, you know, with Stu Skinner, we can't think of, as you alluded to, when he got pulled when they were down 0-2 against the Kings. And we know Bob we saw game 4 last season. We know he can get got, and there is that there. But ultimately, in totality, who do you give the edge to in net?
Sergei Bobrovsky. And I thought going into the playoffs, if Florida was going to win, he was going to have to be their Conn Smythe Trophy winner because of the fatigue factor of this being their third straight Stanley Cup final. The fact that a lot of their players played in the Friendship or the Four Nation event, in February. So I thought for Florida to win, Bobrovsky was going to have to be their Conn Smythe guy. And so far, if we ended the whole playoff now and awarded the Conn Smythe, I believe that he would be the Conn Smythe Trophy winner. But we still have another round to go. I do think Florida has the edge in goal, though.
Yeah, I always say it. If it wasn't for that game 4, I feel like the Conn Smythe would have went to Bob last season. But, you know, he's got another shot at it. Let's dive deeper into the Panthers. They're making their 3rd straight Stanley Cup final appearance. That is hard enough to do in itself, much less go back-to-back and win those cups in 2 straight seasons. But is this team the team to do that? Are they built to go back-to-back?
I'm so glad you used that word, built. And I think they've been built every single year that Billy Zito's been the general manager there. He's got an amazing staff around him. They go out and every year they solicit and get other parts to make their team better, whether it's Sam Bennett, whether it's Matthew Tkachuk, whether it's Seth Jones this year, whether it's Brad Marchand this year. You look at the development of their young players like Anton Lundell. You look at the way the guys want to make differences with the puck on their stick, like Carter Verhaeghe. This is a team that's really thrived because of the additions every single year that a real progressive and wise management group has put on the ice. So I look at it this year. They're better on defense than they were a year ago, and that's no disrespect to Brandon Montour. None at all, who was a really important player for the Florida Panthers team. No disrespect meant to Oliver Ekman-Larsson. But they're better because they're bigger, they're stronger, they're meaner. And that 20-game suspension that Aaron Ekblad had at the end of the year because of a PED situation, that's made him fitter, better, and stronger and rested for this long playoff run that the Panthers are on.
You know who I miss, Pierre? I miss Radko Gudas. I feel like he should be on this squad, and he was part of that foundation. He's the one D-man that I wish we had back. Okay, so I mentioned it. Last season, if you're a Panthers fan, it's kind of like heart attack inducing. You're up 3-0. The Oilers rattle off 3 straight wins, force a game 7, and then, you know, I'm like deep breaths as they're eating the puck in the corner, trying to drain that clock to win the Stanley Cup. What do you think we see this go around? Is it going to go to 7 games?
I think we've got a long final ahead of us. The one thing that could make it a little shorter than 6 is if Edmonton can't take advantage of home ice. The first game's going to matter significantly. If Edmonton can win it, no problem for Florida. They've experienced this before, especially obviously in the Toronto series where they lost the first 2 games in Toronto. But if Edmonton ever lost that first game at home, and the Florida Panthers are good at throwing a lot of mud on the racetrack and causing problems for fast, slick teams like Edmonton, this could be a shorter series. But if that game 1 goes to Edmonton, I think you're in for the long haul. I'm looking forward to game 1, and I think the first 10 minutes of game 1, because of the atmosphere up in Edmonton, could be a bit of a sticky wicket for the Florida Panthers. But if they overcome that, Jacqueline, I think it could be a shorter series.
Yeah, we know Rogers Place can get kind of wild. Really quickly before I let you go, there is all this juju about whether you touch, you know, the trophy or the Clarence S. Campbell Bowl. Do you touch the Prince of Wales trophy? The Florida Panthers did not. They did not touch it. And Edmonton, they touched the bowl. So does that do anything for you? Do you read into stuff like that?
No, because when I was coaching Pittsburgh, we won it back-to-back years, and I think one year we touched it and one year we didn't, and we still won. So I don't put much into it, but I know there's all these people saying now Edmonton didn't win it last year. They didn't touch the bowl. This year they touched the bowl, so it's going to be their turn in terms of reversing it. I don't know how that works out. But all I know is we had two great teams. We got a great rematch. We haven't had one of these since 08 and 09 with Pittsburgh and Detroit. So I think that's going to be fun. And I would tell you one thing. This is not going to be for the faint of heart. There's going to be a whole lot of nasty stuff going on in this series. I'm excited to watch it.
I'm kind of excited, but Pierre, playoff, like OT hockey just takes years off my life. So I might be said faint of heart. Pierre, we certainly appreciate it. Getting us pumped for the Stanley Cup Final, Game 1. That is on Wednesday in Edmonton. You're taking a look at the schedule. Game 2, also in Edmonton. Game 3, that's my birthday, by the way, Florida Panthers. So please, for the love of sweet baby Jesus, give me a win for Game 3, 4, make it a sweep, whatever. More HQ Spotlight coming up.